Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
As you know, we've been looking at a sermon series that has been taking us through the Nativity scene. So we've talked about Mary, and we've talked about Joseph, and today we are going to continue to look at that Nativity scene. Now, I'm excited to talk to you guys today because we're going to talk about some people who might not have actually been at the Nativity. So, we all know what it's like to really want to get somewhere, right? Sometimes we have to wait so patiently to get somewhere. Maybe we're coming home from a long trip, or we're going somewhere we're really excited about. We all know that kind of feeling where we're impatient, right? I just want to get there already. Well, I have a story of a time where I really wanted to get somewhere and I just couldn't quite get there. So, I'm a freshman in college. I've moved from Oregon to California. I have no car. I have very limited funds. But that's kind of the fun, right, of being a freshman in college in another state. So a couple of friends and me were like, all right, we want to go to this concert. And we didn't really know our way around or anything, but we're like, we're just going to do this. We're just going to make it happen, right? The concert tickets weren't very expensive. So we were all excited. The concert was in Long Beach at Polytech High School, if any of you guys are familiar with that, which is not the best neighborhood, just so you know. So we're in Fullerton. We're like, all right, we have no idea how much it's going to cost to get there, and we don't know how we're going to get there. So we decided to call a taxi. Right? So we're all like putting our money together, and we're like, all right, we're gonna just get a taxi. So we get it, and the taxi comes, and we tell him where we want to go, and he's like, well, it's probably going to be about this much. And we're like, it was a large number, but we're like, we already bought these tickets. We're going to be late, so let's just do it. So I think we paid like $20 a person in order to go all the way to Long Beach. So he drops us off. We go to the concert. The concert is a blast. We had a great time. And then it got finished. And the funny thing about when you're college students is you don't always plan everything ahead of time. And so we walked out, and it's kind of nighttime, and we're like, what do we do now? We don't have money to take a taxi again, that's for sure. So we go, all right, let's try and take the bus back to Fullerton. That seems like the only really option we got. So we're thinking, do I have any money? No. Do you have any money? No. Well, we got to get some cash or some coins out so we can ride the bus. So we walk down the street until we find this like 99-cent store or something like that. Like, all right, we'll do cash back. So we decide to go in and get cash back. So we do that. Bought some gum or something like that. And now we're kind of starting to look for a bus stop. Now, I'm just a freshman from Oregon. I don't know these neighborhoods. I don't know what's going on. But I found out later it wasn't the best place to be at that time of night. So we finally find a bus stop, and we see some people, and we're like, hey, where does this bus go? And they're like, oh, yeah, it'll start taking you back towards Orange County. So, like, all right. So we get on the bus. We happened to meet some people and talk to them, and they kind of helped us understand a little bit what we needed to do. So they said, okay, on this next stop, you're going to get off, and then another bus should come. So we get off, and it's this park. I have no idea what city it's in. I've never been back to that place. I have no idea. But we got off. There's this kind of vacant park in the dark, and we're just kind of sitting there by this bus stop, kind of walking around like, when is this bus going to get here? And somebody pulls up the schedule on their phone, and we have to wait for 1 hour, right? So we're just waiting a whole hour at this kind of park going, oh, okay, I hope nothing bad happens. Finally, the bus picks us up. This bus is going to take us all the way to Anaheim. So we're like, okay, Anaheim, we know what to do when we get to Anaheim. So it's like a 45-minute bus ride, and I ended up falling asleep during this bus ride. And I wake up my friend's waking me up like, hey, we're in Anaheim. So we get off the bus and we have to make one more connection. So we go, okay, who has the money? All right, I have no money. It's like, can we take out some money? No, none of us have any money left at this point. So we're sitting at this McDonald's in Anaheim, and we're just waiting because we have no money. We have no way to get back. We're just calling people from school, and we're freshmen, so a lot of our friends don't have cars either. We're just calling, and my friend just I'll never forget, he just falls asleep in this booth at McDonald's. He's just laying in there. People probably thought we were just, if we didn't have a home, we were just hanging out at McDonald's. And so we waited there probably an hour and a half till it was about midnight for someone to come and pick us up. To be in that place, just waiting forever. It's like we've come so far, but we're just not quite there yet. I think this is the emotions that the wise men must have felt as they were standing before Herod. See, the wise men, we have a lot of ideas of who these wise men were. And a lot of Christian history or other types of history try and tell us they were kings, or they were magicians, or they were this, or they were that. But what most scholars have come to now is that they were astronomers. They were scientists of the day who studied the stars and followed the stars. And they were told that this star was going to lead them to the King of the Jews. And the funny thing, and Josh joked about this in his teaser last week, is that they were probably the first people to start heading towards Jesus as his birth was approaching. Because they were coming from far off in the east and they saw the star. But they were probably the last people to actually get to see Jesus. And the reason I say they're waiting is because they've come so far. And the first thing they do when they get to the city is they get called into Herod's courts. And let's go ahead and read what happens as the story continues. If you want to open to Matthew chapter 2, if you have a red Bible, it's page 1497. That's 1497. Matthew chapter 2, starting in verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem was with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people, Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. There's a lot of stuff in that story. A lot of stuff to talk about. Now, first, I want you to know that Matthew is the only gospel we get the story of these Magi. And listen what he says about them. He says, in the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. That's the description we get of these Magi, right? And if you look, there's wonderful stories about them. But if we're talking about what the Bible tells us, it's not a lot. It just tells us that they come from the east. And why do we say they were probably last? It's because of the information we get in this story. Now notice when they go to Herod, and if you read a little bit further on, Herod is going to call for a search for all the young boys in his kingdom. And he's going to say all boys from age 0 to age 2. Now, if Jesus was just born, why wouldn't it just be all newborns? Some people have said, well, maybe the Magi got there a little bit late. And then some people say, well, maybe that's not the case. But we get another piece of information that comes from verse 11. On coming to the house. You get the Greek word oikos, the house. Not the stable, not the barn, not the inn. Coming to the house. Now, if Mary and Joseph and Jesus are in a house by this point, then maybe they've settled in a little bit. Maybe they've begun to start their family. So people don't know the exact age, but the thought is that the Magi get there a little bit late. But that's okay. And the first thing that happens when they get called in is Herod tells them, come to my kingdom, in front of my presence, right? Now, let me tell you something about Herod. Herod is not the most popular guy. He's not really the best ruler of the Jews. And the reason is because people kind of see him and his family as a little bit unstable. They'd probably make a pretty good reality television show today. And they were kind of sellouts because they were of Jewish heritage. But they kind of said, if you give me some power, I'll rule this part of the empire for you, and I'll kind of take money away from my own people. I'll kind of cheat them sometimes. So the Herod family wasn't exactly very popular, and here the Herod himself, he has to call all these people from his courts just to find out what the scriptures say about the Messiah, because he doesn't know where it's going to happen. He doesn't know when it's going to happen. But it seems like some of these other people who are more familiar with the scriptures knew the significance of Bethlehem, but didn't seem that he did. So maybe there we see part of his character, part of his sincerity of faith. And then obviously he says, he's trying to use the wise men, right? He's trying to say, oh, find Jesus so I can worship him, because I really want to worship Jesus, But we all know, because we've read the rest of the story, that his intent is not to worship Jesus, but to possibly even take his life to protect his own authority and his own kingdom. But the wise men, these guys seem to be smart guys. We talked about them being kind of scientists, astronomers. They don't seem to be fooled by Herod. They probably knew a little bit about him, and they probably knew a little bit meeting him and being in his presence. They don't seem to really take his side. They seem to kind of have a different vision in mind. So they go in this wonderful scene. They enter the house, and they meet Jesus, and they bow down before him as a symbol that Jesus is the new king. He's this Messiah that they've waited for, and they offer him gifts. I remember for a long time in my family, we got 3 gifts every year. And I just thought that was whatever. And a lot of people I've learned do this tradition because that's what the Magi gave, these 3 gifts to Jesus. And we can see over time how they've impacted history, how they've impacted tradition. So this whole Magi story, talking about them and getting to the party a little bit late. What is the significance of their impact on the nativity? Right? I'm saying maybe they didn't even make it for the nativity scene, so what is their impact? Now, many people preach this sermon many ways. They can talk about the gifts that they brought Jesus. I've heard people break down each gift and exactly what it means. Some people talk about the distance they traveled. Some people talk about how after they met Jesus, they got this dream from God that told them to leave without returning to Herod, and they obeyed. Some people talk about that part of it. Some people talk about the kneeling down to worship Jesus. But I'm not going to talk about any of these things today. I want to propose a question. If Matthew is the only person who tells us about the Magi, what is their purpose in his story? What is the purpose of the Magi and his story? Now, I don't want to bore you with a bunch of details about the composition of the New Testament. I could talk about it for a long time, but I don't want to go over all those details. But let me say something simple. For those of you who don't know, many people have studied how these Gospels came together, right? Because we have 4 of them. It's 4 versions of the same story, and they're all a little bit different. And people have found different things inside the stories to date them and to see how the authors wrote them. And most scholars have seen that Matthew and Luke, they wrote around the same time, and both of them had biblical stories, and then using their own experience, their own perspective, sometimes they would take the same story, but they tell it just a little different way from their own unique perspective. Right? So then in Matthew and Luke, we get the story of the birth of Jesus. We don't get it in Mark. We don't get it in John. We just get it in Matthew and Luke. And they both decide to highlight different stories based on the message they're trying to communicate. So why does Matthew choose the Magi, and what are their purpose for his story? Let me tell you a time that I went to a Jewish synagogue. So I had the wonderful opportunity to go to a Jewish synagogue one time. So we walked in. I was with a group of people, some students from Hope, and all of us came in. It was a lovely building. They gave us our yarmulkes as we walked in. We chose to wear them as a sign of respect for other people. And we went in and we sat down. I sat next to this wonderful elderly Jewish man. He helped me understand the service because it was entirely in Hebrew, the entire service. And he was just really genuinely great to me. He was. I told him I was a Christian, and he told me his son-in-law was a Christian, and we talked about that a little bit, and he was an absolutely wonderful man. It was a fascinating service. They bring out the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and they sing a song, and they parade it around the room, which is kind of cool to see. Also, to let you know how authentic this is, they split men and women down the middle. Men sit on one side, there's a divider, women on the other side. And so they're taking it around. Different people are reading the Torah. They're doing all the traditions, touching the Torah with their, the name escapes me right now, but they're the traditional scarf things that they wear. And it was a wonderful sight to see. And then afterwards, the rabbi was nice enough to meet with some of our students and let us ask some questions, have some interfaith dialogue. And so we're talking to him, and all of a sudden this one student who is a little bit, what's the right word to describe it? They're a little bit maybe not socially aware or just quite, they didn't know that their timing wasn't perfect. They decided to just blurt this question, which is an okay question to ask, but it just caught me by surprise because I didn't think anyone was going to actually ask it. So she says, "Why don't you guys believe in Jesus?" And I'm like, oh man, what's about to happen right now? Because I just, That seemed like the longest pause between the rabbi's answer. But the rabbi answered it with a lot of grace. He didn't take it offensively. He thought, hey, that's a fair question to ask. This is okay. We're having some dialogue. And he was wonderful just for him to have that kind of attitude. And so he just sat us down and said, well, this is what Jewish people believe. They believe in the temple, and they believe in these things that the Messiah has to do to fulfill Old Testament prophecy, the Torah's prophecy. And he says, we just don't believe Jesus did that. We don't believe that he fulfilled the things that we think have to be fulfilled. And he took us through some of that. And I won't go through all of that, but it was very just honest answer and what he said. And it helped me understand a little bit of what's the difference between Christianity and Judaism. And the reason I bring this up is because the purpose of Matthew's gospel is to let everyone know that Jesus has fulfilled Old Testament prophecy. And to prove this, go to verse 12 where we ended in Matthew 2. Let's start in chapter 13, pick up where we left off. Let's go a little bit further into this story after the Magi's leave. Verse 13, when they had gone, they being the Magi, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. Notice the wording that Matthew uses. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said. You'll see this many times in Matthew's gospel. But he'll tell a story, and he'll say, that story, that fulfilled what God has said. So this is part of the purpose of his gospel, to make sure people know, hey, Jesus, he's the real deal. All those things God told us he was going to do, he's doing it right now. And so when I say, what is the Magi's purpose? It's twofold. The first thing is, it's to show the importance and to glorify Jesus coming into the world. We see them come and bow down before him. We see them offer him gifts. We can't overlook that that's part of the purpose in Matthew's gospel. But even more so, they play an important part in the narrative that Matthew's telling us, which is that Jesus is fulfilling everything that God has said he would, and Jesus is going to be the new leader of Israel, the new Moses. And I know you might say, whoa, Moses, whoa, how did we get to Moses? Where did that come in this story? Well, notice when the Magi go to Herod, what does Herod tell them? What kind of decree does Herod set forward? He says, I want all these kids, right? I want them to be found, or I want them to be put to death. Like, does that sound like the familiar Old Testament story, right? And then Joseph decides to escape, go to Egypt. Does that sound like a little bit of a familiar story? Now, you can call this a divine coincidence. You can call it great writing. You can call it God-inspired. But the Magi play a key role in starting this story that tells how Jesus is the new leader of Israel. And they're never going to need any leader ever again, because Jesus is going to fulfill all the prophecy that has been said in the Old Testament. Now, I know this is a little bit weird. It's not the traditional story that focuses on the Magi's and something that they do. But maybe some of these characters aren't supposed to focus so much on the characters themselves, but they're supposed to be shed light on something about Christ, something about God. And so I hope when you hear this message, I hope when we talk about the Magi's that I hope you don't leave and you think about the Magi's. I hope you leave and you think about Jesus and what Matthew was trying to communicate through this story, which is Jesus is everything we could ever need and everything that anyone has been waiting for, everything that these people from the East spent so much time traveling to get to. All the worries and fears and waiting of God's words from what he said in the past, it's all coming true at this time. And we actually have hope that's here. We don't just have a hope that's coming, we have a hope that's actually here. And in that time, you could actually touch it. It was physical. And I hope that you reflect on the story in this way. And think of the significance of this moment in history, and that Matthew would share this with us so that we could see the importance of Jesus, and we could see the importance of this time of the year. And I know he didn't have that in mind. I know he didn't know Christmas was going to become this tradition, this celebration. But lucky for us, we have a chance to look at all these nativity scenes, all these gospel stories, and we get to see this real picture of Jesus and what he meant then, what he means now, and what he's going to mean for the ages to come. Will you pray with me? Dear Lord, we thank you for these different gospels. It's so cool to see all these different messages, every one unique in their own way. It's fun too to break down the nativity. You know, maybe these people, they didn't even make it on time, and we might think, whoa, what? No, they're all over our houses and all these decorations that we have. But I think it's just amazing these people wanted to travel so far, because that's how much Jesus meant to the world. That's how much he meant to these people. That's how much he meant to this period of time. And look, 2,000 years later, the influence has only grown. And we pray during this season we would be a part of that movement that tries to grow it even more. And we give people the hope that these Magi traveled so far just to meet, just to fall down before, just to give gifts to. May Jesus be our leader. May he be everything that you have talked about since the beginning of time. May we hold him higher than anything forevermore. Amen.